Welcome to First Sleep Aid, calm stories to help you unwind, learn, and fall asleep. From true crime to curious facts and thoughtful ideas, always softly spoken. Subscribe now and take a deep breath. You're in good hands. Welcome. We're taking a deep dive today into something that many of you, even those who appear most successful, might quietly recognize.
Hmm.
That persistent feeling, despite your achievements, that you're somehow not truly worthy, that you might be found out.
Oh,
We're
yeah.
going to explore this experience known as imposter syndrome.
It's a very human experience, isn't it? This sense that your successes might be due to luck or maybe good timing rather than your own capabilities.
Right.
At its heart, imposter syndrome is that ongoing belief that you don't genuinely deserve what you've accomplished, coupled with a real underlying fear that others will eventually see you as less capable than they currently believe.
And this idea, it really first gained prominence back in, 1978,
Okay.
through the work of psychologists Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes.
That's right.
In their initial research, they identified this imposter phenomenon, as they called it, particularly in high-achieving women, really capable individuals who still felt this deep insecurity about their intellectual legitimacy.
Yeah. And while that initial focus was on women, our understanding has definitely evolved quite a bit since then.
It has.
We now recognize that imposter syndrome affects people of all genders, across, a whole spectrum of fields, academia, professional life, even the creative arts.
So it's not really limited by gender or what you do for a living.
Not at all. It seems this experience is pretty widespread.
So for this deep dive, our aim is really to understand the foundations, the structure, I suppose, of imposter syndrome.
Hmm.
Our hope is that if you've ever felt these things, you might find some clarity, maybe some connection with what we discuss, and perhaps feel a little less alone in it all.
And it's important to clarify right up front, this isn't classified as a mental illness.
Okay, that's key.
Yeah, instead, it's understood more as a recurring pattern of thought. And within this pattern, we see several key characteristics.
Okay, let's explore that. What are some of those defining characteristics someone might recognize in themselves?
Well, one of the most common is the tendency to attribute successes to external factors.
Ah,
So instead of acknowledging their own skills or their dedication, their effort, they might explain achievements by saying, oh, I was just lucky, or the circumstances were perfect, or maybe even someone else's mistake made my work look better.
so it's almost like they're actively downplaying their own part in their success.
Exactly.
And I can see how that would feed right into another core thing you mentioned, that persistent fear of being exposed as, well, not good enough.
Precisely. It's more than just general self-doubt. It's a specific, often intense anxiety about being found out as incompetent, despite, all the objective evidence of their abilities.
Right, despite promotions or awards or whatever.
Yeah. And this fear can make it incredibly difficult to truly absorb positive feedback and praise.
How so?
Well, when someone offers a genuine compliment or acknowledges good work, it can feel really dissonant with their internal sense of self. It's almost like they think the other person must have made a mistake.
That resonates. Yeah, if you fundamentally believe you're not as capable as others think, then praise might feel like, yeah, like they just haven't seen the real you yet. Or maybe it's temporary.
Exactly. It feels unearned somehow. And this often leads to another recognizable sign, a tendency to overwork.
Ah, okay. Trying to compensate.
Yes, there's this deep-seated need to constantly prove their worth, to make up for that perceived inadequacy by putting in just an enormous amount of effort, almost like a preemptive strike against being discovered.
It's like they feel they have to work twice as hard just to seem competent by their own internal yardstick anyway.
Hmm.
And you mentioned earlier, these feelings are often hidden. That's a really crucial point, isn't it? From the outside, someone could look incredibly successful, totally confident.
That's absolutely right. The internal experience can be completely at odds with how they present to the world.
Which must make it feel so isolating.
Exactly. Those around them might have absolutely no idea about the internal struggle they're navigating.
Now, it's insightful to think that imposter syndrome isn't just one single thing. Dr. Valerie Young, I believe, identified different patterns or types.
Yes, that's right. Dr. Young's work is really helpful here. It helps us see that while the core feeling of being a fraud might be shared, the specific ways these beliefs take shape can vary quite a bit.
Okay.
So let's start with the perfectionist. For someone fitting this pattern, there's this profound belief that competence means being absolutely flawless.
Wow. Okay. No room for error at all.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Any imperfection, no matter how small, can be seen as definite proof of their inadequacy. It's not just about aiming high, it's the belief that any flaw means total failure. That's a subtle but really critical difference.
So the bar is set impossibly high right from the start.
Yeah.
It's not just doing well, it's achieving perfection, which, let's be honest, is rarely possible.
Precisely. Then we have the superhuman.
Okay.
This individual feels this constant need to work harder than everyone else just to feel like they're meeting a basic standard of adequacy.
Just to feel okay, not even exceptional.
Right. They often push themselves relentlessly, sometimes to the point of burnout, because they believe anything less would reveal their underlying, incompetence.
That sounds incredibly draining, like constantly trying to outrun that feeling through sheer effort.
It is. And then there's the natural genius.
Natural genius. Okay.
Here, the core belief is that true competence should just happen effortlessly. So if they find themselves struggling to learn something new, or if a task takes significant time and real effort, they take that as a sign of a fundamental lack of inherent ability. Like, if I were truly smart, this would be easy.
It's almost like devaluing the whole process of learning and practice, isn't it? Focusing only on this idea of innate, easy talent.
Exactly. Next up is the soloist.
The soloist. Let me guess, they feel they have to do everything alone.
You got it. This pattern involves that deep-seated feeling that asking for help is basically admitting you're inadequate. They believe that if they were truly competent, they should be able to handle every single challenge completely on their own. Seeking support or collaborating feels like a personal failing.
That's tough. It's not just independence. It's like a fear that needing help exposes some fundamental flaw.
Yes, a silent burden they carry. It can really isolate them.
I can imagine. Especially in jobs where teamwork is key. That must create huge barriers.
It really can. And finally, we have the expert.
The expert. Okay, what's their story?
This individual believes they absolutely must possess comprehensive knowledge about every single aspect of a subject before they can act or even offer an opinion.
So they have to know everything first.
Essentially, yes. They have this strong fear of being exposed for any gaps in their understanding, and that can lead to a lot of procrastination or a real reluctance to step outside their established comfort zone.
Wow. So looking across all these types, the perfectionist, superhuman, natural genius, soloist, expert, the common thread seems to be these incredibly rigid and ultimately just unrealistic standards they hold themselves to.
Exactly. Each subtype just sheds light on a different facet of that underlying feeling of fraudulence, but they all seem to stem from these really unattainable self-expectations.
Which naturally makes you wonder, where do these beliefs even come from? What sort of early experiences or maybe broader factors might play a role in developing imposter syndrome?
That's a great question. For many people, their early experiences do play a really significant role.
Like childhood stuff.
Yeah, childhood messages, whether they were spoken out loud or just kind of implied,
Yeah.
that placed a really strong emphasis on achievement or constantly meeting external expectations. Those can definitely be a contributing factor.
Right.
If a child grows up feeling like their worth is primarily judged by their accomplishments, getting the top grades, winning the prize, that can unfortunately lay the groundwork for these feelings later on.
It's that pressure, isn't it? Always having to be the smart one or the talented one, constantly looking outside yourself for validation to feel okay. And it's interesting you mentioned even praise could inadvertently contribute. How does that work? Praise seems like a good thing.
It does. But yeah, surprisingly, the way praise is given can have unintended consequences.
Okay.
If praise focuses only on the outcome, like, wow, you got a perfect score,
Yeah.
or on some inherent trait, you're just so intelligent,
Yeah.
rather than on the effort, the process, the learning involved.
Like saying you worked incredibly hard on that and it really paid off.
Precisely. If it's only about the result or being smart, it can accidentally create this sense that success is tied to some fixed innate quality you either have or you don't.
I see.
So then when challenges inevitably come up later, they might think, oh, maybe I'm not actually that smart after all, because it didn't come easily this time.
That's a really important subtle distinction, shifting focus from the doing and learning to just being smart. Okay. What about bigger picture stuff like societal factors? Does diversity or the lack of it play into this?
Oh, absolutely. Systemic factors can definitely amplify these feelings.
Also.
Well, in workplaces or academic settings where there isn't genuine diversity and inclusion, individuals from underrepresented groups might feel a much stronger sense of being an outsider.
Right.
When you look around and don't see many people in positions of authority or expertise who share parts of your background or identity, it can unfortunately fuel that self-doubt, that feeling that maybe you don't truly belong there.
And I imagine that feeling of being an outsider can then get intensified by things like tokenism or stereotype threat.
Exactly. Feeling like you're the token person can create immense pressure to be absolutely perfect.
Because any mistake feels like it reflects on your whole group.
Precisely. Or it heightens the fear of accidentally confirming some negative stereotype people might hold. That added scrutiny, that constant awareness of being different, it can unfortunately just pour fuel on those underlying feelings of fraudulence.
It really highlights the extra, often unfair weight that people from underrepresented groups might carry. You also mentioned high achievement environments. It seems kind of counterintuitive, shouldn't being around successful people be validating?
You'd think so. But it's a fascinating and sadly common paradox.
Okay.
In environments where everyone seems highly accomplished, it can lead to what psychologists call upward social comparison.
Comparing yourself to people who seem better.
Yeah. You constantly measure yourself against peers who appear incredibly competent and confident. The internal story can become, wow, everyone else here seems to know exactly what they're doing, and I'm the only one secretly struggling and feeling unsure.
So you assume you're the only one feeling that way.
Right. This constant comparison can really intensify that feeling of being an imposter in their midst.
So the very environment that seems like it should boost confidence can actually trigger more self-doubt. Okay, let's shift a bit to the internal stuff. You mentioned cognitive distortions earlier. What exactly are those, and how do they fuel imposter syndrome?
Right. Cognitive distortions. They're essentially patterns of negative or um, unhelpful thinking that can kind of twist our perception of ourselves and our experiences.
Like wearing skewed glasses.
Sort of, yeah. And in the context of imposter syndrome, several specific distortions pop up a lot. One is what we call discounting success.
Okay, discounting success, like we talked about before.
Exactly. Actively dismissing your accomplishments as no big deal or attributing them only to those external factors, luck, timing, easy tasks.
So you finish a great presentation, and instead of feeling good, you think,
You might think, oh, it's just a really simple topic, or the audience was just being nice. It effectively prevents you from truly taking in any positive feedback. It just kind of bounces off.
so any evidence that contradicts the I'm a fraud feeling just gets brushed aside or explained away?
Precisely. Another really common one is mind reading.
Mind reading, assuming you know what others think.
Yes, and usually assuming those thoughts are negative.
Oh, right.
So someone experiencing imposter syndrome might constantly think things like, they probably realize I don't really belong here, or I bet they can tell I'm not as knowledgeable as everyone else, all without any actual evidence.
Wow, think about how much mental energy that takes up, worrying about these imagined judgments.
It's huge. Energy that could be going elsewhere. And then there's overgeneralization.
Okay, what's that one?
That's when you take a single event, maybe a minor mistake, and draw these really broad negative conclusions about your overall competence from it.
Like one typo in a report means.
It might lead to the thought, see, this proves I'm not cut out for this job, or I'm just a complete failure.
Ouch.
These thought patterns can feel incredibly real and totally convincing, even though they're based on, well, distorted interpretations. It's like your inner critic has a megaphone, turning any tiny slip-up into this massive judgment of your worth.
And all of this, I imagine, feeds directly into that deep fear of exposure we keep mentioning. How is this fear different from just, normal self-doubt that everyone feels sometimes?
That's a really important distinction.
Yeah.
The key difference is usually the intensity and the specific nature of the fear.
Oh.
While typical self-doubt might involve questioning your abilities for a specific task or a situation, the fear of exposure in imposter syndrome is this active, often really intense dread of being unmasked as a fraud.
So it's not just, can I do this? It's, they're going to find out I can't do this and it will be awful.
Exactly. It's not simply feeling inadequate. It's the anticipated humiliation and the negative consequences of other people discovering what you secretly believe is your true incompetence.
That sounds incredibly stressful, like constantly being on high alert, waiting for the other shoe to drop.
It is. Constantly vigilant. And this fear can show up in different ways.
Such as?
Well, it can lead to that deep discomfort with receiving praise, like we discussed. It feels like the praise is based on a lie that's about to be revealed.
Right.
It can also make vulnerability feel incredibly risky. Opening up about struggles or admitting you don't know something might feel like handing someone proof of your inadequacy.
So you keep it all bottled up.
Often, yes. And as we touched on, it can even lead to actively avoiding new opportunities or challenges
Why is that?
because the potential for failure and the exposure that might follow feels way more threatening than any possibility of growth or success. The risk feels too high.
We've explored the mechanics, the types, the roots. I wonder if we could shift now, just for a bit, to a more reflective space, acknowledging the actual lived experience, the emotional weight this carries.
Yes, I think that's really important because understanding the definitions and the cognitive stuff is one thing,
Right.
right, intellectually.
Right.
But truly experiencing that constant internal conflict, that often stark difference between how others see you and how you feel inside,
Hmm.
that carries a very real, very significant emotional burden.
It's that feeling, perhaps, of playing a part, always worried about messing up the performance or being revealed as not belonging on the stage.
Mm-hmm.
And I imagine that can be incredibly isolating. Even if you logically know other people feel this way, in the moment, it must feel like a very personal, maybe even shameful secret.
Absolutely. And just the sheer energy it takes
Yeah.
to constantly manage these internal doubts, to over-prepare, like we talked about, to deflect compliments, to maybe avoid situations where you might feel tested.
Yeah.
It's a huge emotional and mental tax,
It's not just a fleeting thought. It's often this background hum.
a pervasive undercurrent. Exactly. And you said it can feel incredibly lonely, even when you're surrounded by people or achieving external success.
And it's probably not constant either.
No, that's a good point. These feelings can be quite fluid. They might ebb and flow in intensity depending on the situation, the people around you, how stressed you are.
So some days are worse than others.
For sure. There might be times when that feeling of fraudulence is really loud,
Mm.
and other times when it quiets down a bit.
Mm.
But the underlying tendency often remains, just sort of lurking beneath the surface.
That's a helpful reminder it's not a fixed state, but something dynamic that shifts. Now, I wanted to gently circle back to something you mentioned, this idea of a kind of quiet strength of uncertainty. It sounds a bit paradoxical at first, framing these tough feelings positively, but could you elaborate on that?
It might seem counterintuitive, yeah. But often, individuals who experience imposter syndrome are actually driven by very high internal standards
Okay.
and a deep sense of responsibility.
Yeah.
Their discomfort, their self-doubt, it's often rooted not in a genuine lack of ability, but in this relentless drive for excellence and a profound fear of falling short of those really high standards they set for themselves.
So the doubt comes from caring deeply and aiming high.
In many cases, yes. And this can frequently lead them to be incredibly conscientious, really deeply reflective about their work and their impact, and often genuinely humble in their approach.
So that constant inner questioning, while definitely causing distress, might also be a motor for growth,
Yeah,
a driver for wanting to improve.
precisely. In a world that often really values loud outward confidence.
Right. Fake it till you make it sometimes.
Exactly. These quieter, more internal strengths, thoughtfulness, diligence, humility, can sometimes be easily overlooked or
Yeah.
even undervalued. Someone who is constantly questioning their own abilities is often more likely to be really thoughtful in their approach, to carefully consider different angles, and to put a huge amount of care and attention to detail into what they do.
It's almost like that internal scrutiny, even though it feels harsh, acts as a pretty effective quality control, a self-correction mechanism.
That's a great way to put it.
Uh,
Exactly. And ironically, perhaps, those who harbor these persistent doubts might actually be less likely to be truly deceptive or wildly overconfident.
Interesting.
Their internal questioning, even though it causes them personal pain, can also be a powerful source of integrity. It can be a significant motivator for ongoing learning and genuine personal development.
It's a really interesting and maybe more compassionate way to look at it. To see that inner critic, which often feels so undermining, might also be tied to a very real desire to do good work, to be authentic.
That's the important nuance, I think. These feelings are complex, they're multifaceted, and while the distress they cause is absolutely real and needs acknowledging,
Yeah, we're not minimizing the pain.
not at all.
Yeah.
But they can also be intertwined with valuable, positive qualities.
So, as we start to bring this deep dive towards a close, what would be the key message or understanding you'd want listeners to take away today?
First and foremost, maybe just to gently reiterate that experiencing imposter syndrome is incredibly
Yeah.
common. Really, really common.
You're not alone in this.
Definitely not. And it does not mean you're a failure or that you actually are deceiving everyone. In fact, it often suggests that you're challenging yourself. You're stepping outside your comfort zone.
Pushing yourself.
Yeah, operating in environments where you're stretching your capabilities.
It's maybe even a sign that you care deeply about what you do, right?
Hmm.
That you're engaged and striving for something meaningful.
Absolutely.
Mm.
It is a deeply human experience to be thoughtful, to have moments or even periods of uncertainty,
Yeah.
and to be constantly striving to learn and to grow.
Mm.
Understanding the roots of these feelings, just becoming aware of the cognitive patterns that fuel them. That truly is the first and maybe the most significant step towards gently shifting that internal narrative
Moving from that silent doubt towards something else.
towards a quieter, more grounded, and ultimately maybe a more compassionate sense of self-trust.
On that gentle note, here's a final thought for you to perhaps sit with. Knowing that these high standards can fuel both your significant achievements and those persistent feelings of being an imposter,
Hmm.
what small, kind shift in how you view those standards might begin to tip the balance, even just slightly, towards greater self acceptance?
Mm.
It's a question worth holding on to. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.